The baton came down like a verdict. Lena's left knee shattered, not a crack, a destruction. She dropped without a sound, one hand hitting concrete jaw, locked eyes still burning. The second blow took her right leg before she could breathe again. Behind the sealed door, Riker Donovan slammed both fists against the glass until the blood came screaming her name, the same woman he'd called weak 4 days ago. The same woman who had just shoved him out and locked the door between them. Saved his life. Chosen to stay. Then, Rex stopped being a trained animal and became something that has no safe name. And the three men who thought they'd won discovered exactly what they'd done wrong. Subscribe, watch until the end, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning Lena Cross walked into Training Yard 7, she didn't announce herself. She didn't have to. She simply appeared at the edge of the yard at exactly 05:30. Rex sitting at her left knee like a statue carved from patience, and she waited. Didn't pace. Didn't check her watch. Didn't do any of the small nervous things that people do when they're about to face 12 men who've already decided they don't respect them. She just waited still as water before a storm. The 12 trainees arrived in a cluster the way men do when they're moving as a pack and not yet a unit. They were loud the way confident people get loud when they want to fill a space before they've earned it. Riker Donovan led the noise the way he always led things, not because he was the best, but because he was the loudest, and in the absence of real authority, volume wins. He stopped when he saw her. The laughter died somewhere between his chest and his mouth. "Ma'am." He let the words sit in the air like something he'd dropped on purpose. "With all due respect, and I genuinely mean all of it, are you actually supposed to be training us?" Two of the men behind him snickered. The sound was small and ugly. Lena's eyes moved to his face. Just her eyes. Nothing else changed, not her posture, not her breathing, not the angle of her shoulders. Just her gaze, slow and deliberate, as a targeting system acquiring a mark. "Do you have a question, trainee?" Her voice was the kind of quiet that made smart people nervous. Riker wasn't smart, not right then. "Yeah, I've got a question." He stepped forward, closing the distance to maybe 5 feet close enough to be a statement. "What exactly makes you think you can teach us anything? Have you seen real combat? Or did they send you here because you checked the right boxes on a form somewhere?" The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full dense with the specific tension of 12 men waiting to see if something would break. Martinez, standing 2 rows back, said quietly, "Riker." Just the name. A warning without teeth. Riker ignored it. "And the dog." He gestured at Rex with the kind of casual dismissal that's designed to sting. "Cute emotional support animal. What's next, therapy cats? A comfort hamster for when the briefings get stressful." 3 men laughed. The rest stayed quiet, watching Lena's face for the crack they were sure was coming. Anger or tears? Or the flushed helplessness of someone who doesn't know how to fight back without raising their voice? They got nothing. Rex isn't an emotional support animal. Lena's tone hadn't shifted by a single degree. He's a military working dog, specialization threat assessment and hostile elimination. 8 years active service. 47 confirmed hostile neutralizations. The laughter died. Riker blinked. 47. 47, she confirmed. "Do you know how many confirmed hostile neutralizations you have, trainee Donovan?" His jaw tightened. "That's classified. It's 3. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. 2 during the Kandahar Operation 2019. 1 during an extraction in Syria. All at distance. All with rifle support. You have never once engaged in hand-to-hand combat inside a hostile zone. Your file says you have never been in a position where your weapon was stripped and you had to fight with your hands." The color left Riker's face so fast it was almost visible. "How did you... I read files." Her eyes moved unhurried to the man behind him. "Thompson. 2 confirmed, both vehicle-based. Martinez, 1 accidental discharge during a raid. You believed the target was reaching for a weapon. It was a cell phone. You spent 6 months in mandatory counseling after that." Her gaze moved again. Brennan, 0. Collins, 0. Williams 1 ruled friendly fire. You were cleared, but the review took 11 months and it aged you in ways that don't show up in photographs. The yard had gone absolutely silent. Thompson's smirk had died somewhere around his own name. By the time she finished, every man was standing differently, straighter, tighter, the way people stand when they suddenly realize they've been seen. "Jesus," someone whispered. "I don't need Jesus." Lena took a single step forward. "I need you to understand something before we begin. You look at me and your brains immediately run a calculation. Small, young, female, service dog. And the answer your brain produces is weak, doesn't belong, diversity initiative, political theater." She paused. "You're wrong." Riker found his voice, though it had lost some of its armor. "Okay, Rambo, so prove it. What are you going to do, lecture us to death?" "No." She gestured toward the training mat behind them. "I'm going to give you an opportunity to prove you belong here. All of you. At once." The trainees exchanged glances. "All of us," Martinez said slowly. "Against you. And Rex. That's 12 men. I know how to count." Thompson made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Come on. There are 12 of us. I know." Lena walked toward the mat, Rex moving with her in perfect silence. "Here's the deal. If you can neutralize me and secure me for extraction within 10 minutes, you pass. You get reassigned to a new instructor, someone who looks the part, someone whose credentials you're comfortable with." She turned to face them. "But if I neutralize all 12 of you first, you stay. You train under me. You follow my orders without questioning my authority based on what I look like. Not once. Not ever again." Riker's grin came back sharp at the edges. "Deal." From the back, Brennan, the quiet one from Montana, the one who almost never spoke, raised his hand. "Rules. No permanent damage, no killing strikes, no eye gouges." She looked at each of them. "Everything else is available." "What about the dog?" Collins asked. "Rex operates under the same rules I do." Williams, 6'4" and 240 pounds of structured muscle, cracked his knuckles with the slow patience of a man who's never lost a physical argument in his life. "This is going to be embarrassing for you, ma'am." Lena looked at him without blinking. "Yes," she said simply. "It will be." They surrounded her the way predators surround something smaller, confident, certain, already dividing the credit before the work was done. Riker moved first, a grab for her arm, fast and purposeful, the kind of move that ends most fights before they start. Lena wasn't where his hand expected her to be. She'd redirected, not blocked, using his own momentum to spin him sideways, while 2 fingers found the nerve cluster at his shoulder with surgical precision. Riker's entire right arm went numb from the shoulder to the wrist. His brain was still processing that when his legs stopped working and the mat came up to meet him. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. Thompson came from her left, driving hard, expecting to use his weight as a closing argument. Rex moved, not a leap, not an attack, just a precise repositioning that placed 65 pounds of muscle directly in Thompson's path at exactly the wrong moment. Thompson's momentum did the rest. He went over the dog's back like a wave breaking over a rock face first into the mat. "The dog," Martinez started. "Is the least of your problems," Lena said, already turning. Martinez was smart. He'd studied martial arts. He came at her with his hands up, his weight, balanced his approach, measured and careful. He committed to a punch, disciplined, controlled. Lena stepped inside his guard, while the punch was still traveling her palm, finding his solar plexus at precisely the angle that empties lungs without causing damage. She guided him down as his legs buckled, controlled, and almost gentle, the way you help someone sit who doesn't know they're about to. 5 men down, inside 20 seconds. "Rush her!" Williams bellowed from the back. "All of us together, she can't take that." They tried. All 7 remaining trainees converged simultaneously, a wave of coordinated mass that should have been overwhelming. That was overwhelming by any reasonable measure. Lena moved through it like water finding the path of least resistance. She ducked under William's haymaker and used Collins's charge to redirect him into Brennan. She deflected Harper's grab into Rodriguez's path. Rex absorbed Shaw with a shoulder check that sent him spinning sideways, and Peterson stumbled over Shaw and the whole thing collapsed like a carefully aimed demolition. Through the chaos, Lena remained completely calm. Every movement precise. Every strike measured. Every redirect calculated to produce maximum disruption with minimum effort. She wasn't fighting. She was solving a problem, 12 problems, with the patient efficiency of someone who's been doing this so long, it stopped feeling like effort. Williams came again, this time low, a proper tackle, powerful and technically sound, the kind of move that works every time against someone half his weight. Lena dropped her center of gravity, caught his shoulder, and used the full force of his own charge to roll him over her hip. 240 pounds of muscle became briefly airborne, then met the mat with a sound like a side of beef hitting concrete. Williams lay there, genuinely confused, staring at the ceiling. "How?" he managed. "How is that possible?" "You're strong," Lena said, not even breathing hard. "I'm not. So I use your strength instead of competing with it." 6 minutes after they'd surrounded her, all 12 trainees were on the mat. Some were groaning. Some were simply lying still, running internal diagnostics. All of them were staring at her with expressions that had traveled a long way from where they'd started. Riker pushed himself up on his elbows, his right arm still fizzing with pins and needles, his pride making sounds he didn't have words for. "What are you?" Lena crouched until they were eye level. "I'm your instructor, and you just completed the first lesson." "What lesson?" Martinez asked from somewhere behind him, still working on getting air back into his lungs. "Assumptions kill." She stood. "You assumed I was weak because I'm small, incompetent because I'm young, frightened because I'm quiet. Every single one of those assumptions put you on your back inside of 6 minutes." She walked slowly around the perimeter of them, Rex moving at her heel. "In the field, assumptions are how you die. The enemy doesn't care about your expectations. They don't care what you think they should look like, how they should move, what they should be capable of. They care about exploiting the blindness your assumptions create. And all of you, every single one of you, went blind the moment you saw me." Thompson sat up slowly, rubbing his jaw. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "I didn't learn to fight." She stopped walking. "I learned to survive. There's a difference." "What difference?" Brennan was the one who asked, and his voice had lost every trace of the mockery from earlier. He genuinely wanted to know. "Fighting is about dominance," Lena said. "About proving you're the stronger one. Survival is about staying alive by whatever means the moment requires. You fight to win. I survive to continue. You came at me wanting to beat me. I came at you wanting to neutralize a threat. That difference is why you're on the mat." Riker got to his feet. It cost him something. "That wasn't a fair fight." "No," Lena agreed. "It wasn't. Fair fights don't exist. If you find yourself in a fair fight, someone failed the mission planning." "So what happens now?" Collins asked. "We just accept that you destroyed us and move on." Something shifted in Lena's expression. Small, almost invisible, but it was there. "Now you get up. You process what happened. And tomorrow, we begin actual training. Today was the entrance exam." Harper's voice came out horrified. "That was the entrance exam. That was me being considerate." Lena turned toward the building. "If that had been real, 6 of you would be dead, and the other 6 would be in a position where you'd be wishing you were. Get cleaned up. Dismissed." She walked away, Rex at her side, neither of them looking back, and left 12 elite trainees sitting on a mat trying to rebuild the world they'd walked in with, which no longer fit the shape it had been in an hour ago. Riker watched her go. Something was working in his chest that he didn't have a clean word for. It wasn't respect exactly. Not yet. It was the precursor to respect, the uncomfortable recognition that you've been wrong about something you were completely certain about. He hated the feeling. He buried it. "Martinez," he said, his voice coming out harder than he intended. Martinez limped over. "Yeah. We were going easy because We weren't going easy. Martinez's voice was flat. I put everything I had into that chokehold attempt. She moved before I got within 2 feet of her. Riker's hands clenched. Then she got lucky. Twice with 12 of us. Martinez looked at him with something careful in his eyes. Dude, come on. Tomorrow we come back ready, Riker said. We study her patterns, we identify her weaknesses, and we don't let her make us look like that again. Not ever again. Thompson joined them, moving like a man who'd recently been introduced to the concept of his own limitations. Or hear me out, we could learn from her. Learn from her. Riker said it like the words had a bad taste. She got lucky. She wasn't lucky, Brennan said quietly. He'd walked over without any of them noticing, which was something he did. I tried to take her from behind with a rear choke. She slipped it before I made contact. That's not luck. That's skill we've never seen before. You're weak, Riker said, and immediately knew it was the wrong thing and said it anyway because pride does that. No one answered him. Not because they agreed. Because they'd seen what they'd seen, and the seeing had already started changing things that arguments couldn't reach. They didn't see Lena pause at the doorway just for a moment, her hand tightening slightly on Rex's lead. Didn't see the way her jaw set a fraction harder. She heard everything. Every word. Every plan for revenge dressed up as redemption. She was already 3 steps ahead. That night, Riker sat in the barracks with a notebook writing. Movement patterns he thought he'd identified. Angles. Timing. Potential weak points in her footwork. He was halfway through a diagram when Martinez's voice came from the dark. It's midnight. I'm aware. Whatever you're writing down isn't going to help you tomorrow. Riker kept writing. You don't know that. I know that she moved like she knew what we were going to do before we did it. Patterns on paper don't help you when someone is already 3 moves past your last thought. Martinez rolled over. You wouldn't be this worked up if she was a he. Riker's pen stopped. What's that supposed to mean? It means the thing eating at you isn't that she beat you. It's that she beat you. You can't process it because it doesn't match the story you've been told your whole life about how strength is distributed. That's not... You spent 6 years building a self-image around being physically dominant. She walked in and took that apart in 6 minutes. That's not an injury to your pride. That's an injury to your identity. Martinez's voice was quiet, not cruel, just honest. The question isn't whether she's good enough to teach you. The question is whether you're ready to be taught. Riker didn't answer. Couldn't answer because the part of him that wasn't drowning in wounded pride knew Martinez was right. But the other part, the louder part, the part that had been built and reinforced and rewarded for 23 years, couldn't accept it. So he buried it. Told himself tomorrow would be different. Had no idea how right that was, or how completely different from what he meant. The next morning, 500 hours they assembled in the yard. Lena was already there. Rex beside her, both of them carrying the same unshakable stillness they'd carried the day before. She looked like someone who had slept well and woken up without regret, which was the most aggravating thing about her. Today we begin instruction, she said, her voice carrying flat and clear across the yard. Yesterday was assessment. Today is, I want a rematch. Riker stepped forward, his voice pitched louder than necessary. One-on-one, no teams, no dog, just you and me, and we see what you actually are when you can't use tactics and surprise. The yard went quiet in that specific way it does when something irreversible is about to happen. Lena looked at him, not at him the way a person looks at an obstacle, at him the way a diagnostician looks at a problem they've already solved. No. No. Yesterday's exercise served its purpose. Repeating it serves yours, not mine. You're afraid. He said it knowing it wasn't true, and said it anyway, which was the loneliest kind of dishonesty. You got lucky with 12. You don't want to test that with 1. Something changed in her face. Not anger, something colder and more focused. Okay, she said. He blinked. Okay, 1-on-1, right now. Same rules. You want to prove yesterday was luck, this is your opportunity. She walked toward the mat. Rex observes unless you're about to genuinely injure me, which you won't. But he stays back. Riker was already moving, adrenaline flooding his system, his body convinced that what his brain wanted was something he could physically solve. He was still in motion when her foot caught him in the solar plexus. Not hard, just precisely placed, just enough to drop him to one knee and leave him gasping like a man who's just discovered he's been holding his breath for years. Rule 1. Lena's voice was completely level. The fight starts when the fight starts, not when you're ready, when the threat decides. Riker surged up, swung hard, let anger override technique, which is exactly what she'd been waiting for. She slipped every punch without blocking a single one, just moved like she already knew the coordinates of his fists before he did. Rule 2. Still calm. Anger makes you predictable. Predictable makes you dead. Shut up. He threw his best combination jab crosshook, uppercut, 10,000 repetitions of muscle memory. She ducked the jab, redirected the cross into empty air, caught his wrist on the hook, and used it to spin him sideways, and the uppercut went to a place where he no longer was because he was already falling. Rule 3. She kept talking as he hit the mat. Your opponent will use everything you give them. You're giving me anger, frustration, pride. These are weapons. I'm using them. Riker came up in a crouch, breathing hard, already sweat breaking on his forehead. She looked exactly as she had when they started, calm, present, not remotely breathing hard. Yield, she said quietly. Accept that you have things to learn. Move forward. Never. He charged. Went for the tackle, a real one this time, low and powerful. All of his weight committed, the kind of move that ends conversations permanently. The world inverted. One moment he was driving forward. The next he was airborne, and then his back met the mat with enough force to make his vision go white at the edges. She was kneeling beside him before he'd finished, landing one knee on his chest. Her hand positioned at his throat, not touching, just there, a statement rather than an action. Yield, she said. Please. That last word was the worst part. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't enjoying any of this. The please meant she wanted it to be over, and the reason she wanted it over wasn't contempt. It was something closer to compassion. She felt sorry for him, and that landed harder than anything she'd physically done. I yield, he said. The words came out broken. I yield. She stood immediately and offered her hand. He stared at it for a long moment that cost him something to get through. Then he took it. She pulled him to his feet with a grip that was stronger than it had any right to be. Good. Her voice carried to the rest of the unit. Training begins. Partner up. We're working on what you just saw, using momentum, reading the opponent, maintaining calm under pressure. The principles are simple. The application takes time. Let's use it. They moved. And they were different now. Quieter. More deliberate. The mockery replaced by something that was still figuring out what it wanted to be when it grew up. Maybe respect. Maybe the first cautious shoots of genuine attention. Riker stood off to the side, breathing through the residue of the fight, trying to find the corner where the lesson lived. Martinez appeared at his elbow. You okay? No. Honest answer for once. She made me look like I've never trained a day in my life. Twice. Then maybe stop trying to beat her and start trying to understand how she does what she does. It's the same thing. It really isn't. Martinez watched Lena correct Thompson's stance across the yard, her voice patient and specific, her hands demonstrating angles without touching him. Beating her is about you. Understanding her is about the fight. She's been trying to show you that. You keep choosing yourself over the lesson. Riker didn't answer. Couldn't answer because part of him, the part that was quietly, painfully beginning to grow, knew that Martinez was right. He had no idea what the next 72 hours would do to all of them. No idea that the thing growing slowly in his chest, the uncomfortable opening of an assumption he'd lived inside his whole life, was about to be tested in the worst possible way. No idea that 3 days from now, he would watch the toughest person he'd ever met have both her legs destroyed in front of him, unable to do a single thing to stop it, and that she would shove him out the door first. And that in doing so, she would teach him the last thing he'd expected to learn from anyone, that the real measure of a person isn't what they do when they're winning. It's what they choose when the cost is everything. 3 days passed the way hard things do, fast on the outside, grinding on the inside. Lena taught them things that had no business existing in any curriculum they'd ever seen. Pressure point sequences that could drop a 200-pound man without breaking a sweat. Psychological disruption tactics, how to fracture an opponent's concentration mid-engagement using nothing but timing and sound. Micro-expression reading, the tiny involuntary signals a body broadcasts a half-second before it commits to violence. How to manufacture hesitation in someone who has none. She was without question the most effective instructor any of them had ever encountered. Riker hated it with a passion that was starting to embarrass even him, not because she was bad, because she was extraordinary. And every hour she spent being extraordinary was another hour he had to spend quietly dismantling the version of himself he'd built over 23 years. The version that knew what strength looked like, what authority sounded like, what a person worth following was supposed to be. That version hadn't survived the mat on day one. He was still sifting through the wreckage. On the morning of the 4th day, they were running a tactical scenario, hostage rescue urban environment, the kind of exercise that requires the brain to do 6 things simultaneously while the body does 4 others. Lena was positioned off the line, Rex at her knee, her voice moving around the exercise like a second instructor. Martinez, your 6 is exposed. Thompson, stop clustering with Collins, you're 1 target instead of 2. Brennan, good angle, hold that. A pause. Riker, you're thinking about the objective instead of the space between you and it. Slow down. Riker didn't slow down. He was mid-stride when the first gunshot cracked through the enclosed yard like something breaking that wasn't supposed to break. The round hit the wall 6 inches from Lena's head. Concrete dust exploded outward. Rex was on his feet before the echo finished. For 1 full second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The mind does that, freezes at the threshold of something it wasn't built to process this fast. Then Lena's voice cut through it like a blade through rope. Contact. All trainees evacuate. Now. This is not part of the exercise. Move. 2 more shots. Then a third. Coming from the observation deck above, elevated position, controlled spacing, the deliberate cadence of professionals who are not in a hurry because they know they don't need to be. Riker's training kicked in a half-second behind his fear. He turned toward the exit and stopped. Because Lena wasn't moving toward the exit, she was moving toward them. Putting herself between the trainees and the elevated fire, her body becoming the largest available piece of cover in the yard. Rex, protect. The command came sharp and quiet. The dog instantly shifted position, driving the trainees toward the door with his body 65 pounds of trained muscle hurting 12 men like they weighed nothing. Go, Lena said. Her eyes were moving up to the deck, counting figures, calculating angles. 3 of them. Tactical gear, moving with coordination that wasn't improvised. Get them out. Martinez, that's an order. We can't leave you. You can and you will. For the first time since they'd met her, Lena's voice cracked at the edge. Not with fear. With something more specific, the sound of someone who knows exactly what is happening and has accepted it faster than anyone watching can follow. They're here for me, not you. If you stay, you die with me. If you go, you live without me. Choose. Another shot. Closer. The angle shifting as the figures on the observation deck descended, closing distance methodically. Riker made his decision in the space between 2 heartbeats. The wrong decision. The stupid decision. The only decision he was capable of making in that moment. He ran toward her. Come with us. He grabbed her arm. Right now, we run together. She yanked free with a strength that shocked him. I'm the target. If I run, they follow. If they follow, 12 people die in a corridor, instead of 1 person dying in an open yard. Her eyes found his, direct and absolute. This is not a negotiation, trainee. Get out. I'm not leaving you. Riker. She said his first name, first time she'd ever used it. The sound of it stopped him cold. When you tell this story later, and you will tell it, tell them I gave the order. Tell them you followed it. Tell them I made the choice. Her hand found his shoulder, and she shoved him backward with everything she had. "Now go!" Martinez caught him, and dragged him, both of them stumbling through the door as Rex drove the last of the trainees through ahead of them. The door sealed electronic lockdown, triggered by gunfire detection, irreversible from their side. The last thing Riker saw before the door closed was Lena turning to face 3 armed men with nothing but her hands, her dog, and an expression so composed it looked like something that had been prepared in advance. Through the reinforced window, 12 men stood and watched what they could not stop. She was extraordinary. Even then, even outnumbered, even without cover, even knowing exactly what was coming. She took the first operative down with a strike to the throat that dropped him before he finished raising his weapon, then followed it with a knee to the temple that finished the argument. The second one caught a palm strike to the face that produced a sound none of them wanted to think too hard about. But the third one was different. He'd hung back, waited, let his partners draw her attention and her effort, and when she turned to finish the second, he was already moving, not with rage, not with urgency, just with the cold mechanical precision of someone who has done this before and intends to do it efficiently. The baton caught her left knee from the side. The sound it made was something Riker would hear for the rest of his life, in the specific silence between sleeping and waking. Lena went down to one knee, stayed there, still fighting, still refusing her face a locked door that nobody was getting through. The operative drew back and hit the other knee with the same surgical patience. Both legs gone. She couldn't stand, couldn't run, could barely hold herself upright on the ground, one hand on the concrete, the other still raised, still ready, still refusing to stop being a threat, even when she'd become entirely defenseless. Riker was pounding the glass with both fists, screaming her name, not caring what his hands felt like, not caring about anything except the absolute horror of watching someone absorb that kind of damage and still not break. The 3 operatives moved in to finish it. That was when Rex stopped being a military working dog. The sound he made wasn't a bark. It wasn't any sound that had a comfortable name. It came from somewhere below. Training, below conditioning, below the 8 years of discipline that had built him into something reliable and controlled. It came from the place where love lives when it has nowhere left to go except forward. He hit the first operative at full speed, 65 pounds of muscle, and something that had stopped being manageable the moment both of Lena's legs were destroyed. He didn't go for the arm the way his training dictated. He went for the throat. The operative went down and did not get up. The second one tried to bring his weapon around. Rex was already on him, jaws closing on the wrist with enough force to end the argument about whether the gun was going to be a factor. The operative reached for a knife with his free hand. Rex crushed the wrist, then went higher. Through the window, 12 men watched a creature they had mocked 4 days ago. The emotional support animal, the comfort dog. The punchline systematically dismantled 2 armed professionals with the focused efficiency of something that had decided the rules no longer applied. "Jesus," Martinez said. "Jesus, somebody stop him." Nobody could stop him. The door was locked. They were witnesses, not participants. The glass between them was the longest distance any of them had ever stood across. The third operative made the mistake of turning his back on Rex to finish Lena. Rex crossed the distance in 2 strides, hit him from behind, took him at the knees, then moved upward with the relentless logic of an animal that has identified a threat and intends to resolve it completely. Then Lena's voice, weaker now, but still carrying the specific authority of someone whose voice is the last thing that matters, cut through everything. "Rex, heel." The dog stopped. Instantly. Mid-motion teeth still bared blood on his muzzle, standing over a body that was no longer a problem. He stopped because she told him to, and because, even broken, she was still the only thing in the world that mattered to him. "Heel," she repeated, quieter now. "Good boy, it's over. Come here. Good boy." Rex walked to her, sat beside her, pressed his body against her side, and made a sound that had no military application. A low, aching whine, the sound of an animal that has just broken every rule it ever learned, and doesn't know yet whether it was worth it. Her hand found his head. "Good boy," she said softly. "Not your fault. You did right. Good boy." Then her eyes rolled back and she went down. The lockdown lifted 11 seconds later. Riker was through the door before it finished opening. He reached her first, dropped to his knees on the concrete without noticing the impact. 2 fingers to her throat, pulse there present but thin, the vital signs of someone whose body is redirecting every available resource toward survival and doesn't have much left to spare for anything else. Rex growled, low and warning, the first aggression he'd ever shown toward any of them. "Easy!" Riker kept his voice level, kept his hands visible. "Easy, boy. I'm helping her, that's all. I'm on your side." The dog's eyes were wrong, still wild, still carrying the residue of what he'd just done, like a man waking from a dream and finding blood on his hands. He looked at Riker for a long moment, reading something, and then marginally stood down. "Both tibias are compromised," Brennan said, already on the ground beside her, already working with the controlled calm of someone whose hands know what to do, even when the rest of him is in pieces. "Left femur looks bad. We need to immobilize before we move her. Thompson every blanket in this building. Martinez call it in. Riker perimeter. Collins check those 3 for vitals. Move." They moved. Nobody questioned Brennan. Nobody pointed out that he was a trainee with no command authority. They followed him because he was right, because she had taken hits meant for them, and because standing around processing the horror of that was something they could do later when she was stable. Riker swept the perimeter. Found nothing, came back to find Brennan had achieved in 5 minutes what most field medics take 10 to accomplish. Her leg stabilized, her airway clear, her vitals documented and transmitted. "Who were they?" Collins asked, standing over the covered shapes of the 3 operatives. His voice had a careful flatness that meant he was holding something at arm's length to avoid feeling it. "Who the hell sends professionals after a training instructor?" Riker crouched over the nearest body. No unit insignia, no national markings. The gear was high quality, untraceable, the kind of equipment purchased through channels that don't leave paper. He found a patch on the inside collar, not a flag, not a unit designation, just a small symbol, a rook inside a circle. Subtle enough to miss if you weren't looking. He photographed it without knowing why, filed it somewhere in the back of his mind for later. The medics arrived in 6 minutes. Took Lena away on a stretcher, sirens already pulling the sound away from the yard, leaving 12 trainees in a space that had been a training facility an hour ago and was now something else entirely. Rex sat exactly where she'd collapsed. Didn't move when they tried to coax him. Didn't eat. Just sat with his nose pointed at the empty space where she'd been and mourned in the specific way that animals mourn, without language, without distraction, without any of the defenses humans build around grief to make it bearable. "What do we do now?" Martinez asked. Riker looked at the covered bodies, at the blood drying on the concrete, at the dog who had loved one person so completely he'd dismantled 3 armed men to keep her breathing. "Now we figure out who she really is," he said, "and why someone wants her dead badly enough to send a kill team to a military training base in broad daylight." The interrogations started within the hour. They were separated, taken to individual rooms, questioned by people whose credentials were above their pay grade: Naval Intelligence, FBI. A third agency that nobody named, but everyone recognized by the specific economy of their questions. Nothing wasted, nothing personal. Everything aimed at extracting what they needed and leaving the rest behind. Riker sat across from a federal agent with a face like a closed door, and told his version of the truth, which left out Brennan's field medicine and his own failed attempt to pull Lena back but was otherwise accurate. "Was Instructor Cross surprised by the attack?" the agent asked. Riker thought about her face in that moment, the way she'd moved, not frantically, not with the jerky improvisation of someone caught off guard, but with the smooth, immediate efficiency of someone responding to a scenario they'd run through before. "No," he said. "She was ready. Not for this specifically, but for something. She called the shots too clean. She knew exactly where to put herself, what order to move people in, when to stop trying to get out, and start trying to buy time. That's not improvisation. That's preparation. The agent wrote something. Preparation for what kind of threat? For being found, Riker said. Whatever she was before this assignment, whoever she was, she's been waiting for the bill to come due for a long time. The agent closed his notebook. Instructor Cross's background is classified above your clearance level. 3 men tried to kill her in front of 12 witnesses. I think we're past the point where classification is the priority. You'd be surprised what remains a priority in situations like this. The agent stood. Return to your barracks. Do not discuss this incident with outside parties. If approached by media, refer them to base public affairs. And her, what happens to her? The agent paused at the door. That's not your concern, trainee. It was the wrong answer. Riker knew it. The agent knew it. The silence between the statement and the door closing said everything neither of them was going to say out loud. That night, all 12 of them gathered in the barracks and broke approximately 6 regulations without caring about any of them. Thompson had made contacts in intelligence branches who owed him favors, or who he could reach through people who owed people. Every call came back the same. Dead end. Silence. 2 of them produced something worse than silence, a quiet, specific warning to stop asking. Her service record is sealed, Collins said. Not classified, sealed, presidential-level restriction. I've never seen that on a training officer. I've never seen that on anyone below the rank of general. The operatives, Peterson said from the corner. He'd been quiet so long they'd half forgotten he was there. That symbol on the patch, I've seen it before. Afghanistan. On a man we were told never existed running a black ops network so far off the books it didn't have a name. The kind of network that does things governments need done, but can't be connected to. American, Thompson asked. Not specifically. Not anything specific. That symbol isn't national. It's something above nations. Peterson's voice was careful, measured the voice of a man who once asked a question about this, and learned what asking costs. I was told to forget I'd ever seen it. Told in terms that made the consequences of not forgetting very clear. The room absorbed that. So somebody above governments, Martinez said slowly, sent professionals plural to kill a 22-year-old training instructor. On a military base. In broad daylight. He let the sentence sit. Does anyone else feel like we're only seeing about 10% of what's actually happening? Rex, Brennan said suddenly. He'd been sitting against the far wall, arms resting on his knees, staring at the floor. What happened to Rex? Nobody knew. The dog had been present when they'd left for interrogation. Gone when they returned. Military police probably. Animal control. The bureaucratic machinery that handles things that fall outside its usual categories. They'll euthanize him, Peterson said. Protocol. Dogs that kill personnel regardless of circumstance get put down. It doesn't matter that the personnel were trying to murder his handler. It doesn't matter that 12 people are alive because of what he did. The rule is the rule. That's wrong. Brennan's voice was quiet, but the quality of the quiet had changed. That dog saved our lives. Every one of us in this room owes him something. We're trainees, Thompson said. We have zero authority, zero leverage. You want to go up against military bureaucracy to save a dog who by every written standard violated his entire training protocol. Yes, Brennan said. Simply without decoration. Yes, that's exactly what I want to do. He looked around the room at each face one by one. How many of you would have gone back in through that door? How many of us would have gotten ourselves shot trying to help her if Rex hadn't already finished it? How many of us owe our lives specifically to the fact that he stopped being a good dog and became something else instead? One by one hands went up. Riker's went up last. But it went up. Then we fight for him, Brennan said. I don't know how. I don't know if we can win, but we try. We show up. We make noise. We don't let them do this quietly and call it procedure. Agreed, said Martinez. Agreed, said the rest of them in the uneven unison of 12 men who have just accidentally become a unit. Meanwhile, in a hospital room, 3 buildings and a world away, Lena Cross lay unconscious, with both legs shattered and both legs elevated, and machines doing the careful work of monitoring a life that had chosen to stay, despite everything that had tried to end it. There were no visitors. The rule was immediate family only. She had no immediate family. So the machines beeped in the silence, and Rex wasn't there to press against her side, and nobody sat in the chair beside her bed, because nobody was allowed to, and she was alone in the way that people who have spent their whole lives becoming ghosts are eventually, inevitably, alone. Riker sat in a plastic chair outside the ICU doors and listened to the nurse tell him for the 4th time that he needed to leave. He didn't move. "She doesn't have family," he said. "There's nobody else. That's not how hospital policy works, son." "Then explain to me who makes decisions for a soldier with no next of kin when she's unconscious and critical. Because I've been reading regulations all night, and I'm fairly certain the answer involves designated representatives from the chain of command. And right now, we're the closest thing she has to that." The nurse looked at him for a long moment, at the dried blood on his knuckles, at the specific exhaustion in his eyes, at something in his face that had nothing to do with policy and everything to do with the kind of debt that doesn't have paperwork. "I'll ask the doctor," she said finally. Martinez dropped into the chair beside him and handed him a cup of cafeteria coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during a previous administration. "Brennan got arrested," Martinez said. Riker's head came up. "What? Tried to break into the military police kennel. Was going to physically remove Rex before the paperwork could catch up with reality." Martinez took a sip of his coffee, made a face, kept drinking it anyway. "Thompson's handling it. Whatever the military equivalent of bail is." "Is Rex still alive?" "For now. Hearings tomorrow morning." Riker looked at the doors. Behind them, somewhere past the nurses and the machines and the regulations, was a woman whose legs had been destroyed so that he could be standing here with bad coffee and a bruised conscience. "I called her weak," he said. Not to Martinez particularly, to the air, to the version of himself from 4 days ago. Day 1. Called Rex a comfort dog, made it a joke. His voice came out rough at the edges. "And she saved me anyway, shoved me out the door. Could have run herself, could have left us to figure it out, and instead, she turned around and walked toward them." "Yeah," Martinez said. No cushioning, just acknowledgement. "Why would anyone do that for people who treated her the way we did?" "Because that's what real leaders do." Martinez turned the coffee cup in his hands. "My father spent 26 years in uniform. He used to say you can always tell real leaders from fake ones by what they do when everything's on fire. Fake ones run. Real ones step forward even when stepping forward costs them everything." The doors at the end of the corridor opened. A doctor emerged, still pulling off surgical gloves, carrying the particular tiredness of someone who has just spent several hours fighting for someone else's life and is still not certain who won. Riker was on his feet. "How is she?" The doctor studied them. "Family. Her unit." Riker met his eyes. "She has no family. We're it." A long moment. Then the doctor spoke. Both tibias shattered. Left femur fractured in 3 places. Significant soft tissue damage throughout both legs. She was stable, but the road ahead was long and the destination uncertain. Full mobility might never be recovered. Partial mobility was the optimistic projection. The honest projection involved words like permanent and limited and adjusted expectations. Riker heard the words the way you hear something in a dream present registering but landing somewhere slightly removed from where it should. Never regain full mobility. Lena, who moved like water through air, who fought 12 men and remained unruffled, who had built her entire existence around being faster and sharper and more capable than everything that came at her, reduced to adjusted expectations by a man with a baton and a job to do. "Tell her something when she wakes up," Riker said. "Tell her we tried to stay. Tell her we wanted to fight with her." The doctor looked at him steadily. "I can tell her you were here," he said carefully. "The rest you tell her yourself." Riker sat back down in his chair. He wasn't leaving. He'd decided that already, somewhere between the gunshots and the locked door, and the image of Rex pressing himself against her broken body, covering her with everything he had left. Some debts you pay with presence. You show up. You stay. You don't let the person who paid the price be alone in the dark while the paperwork sorts itself out. Tomorrow, there was a hearing for Rex, and Riker had been reading regulations for 3 hours, and he'd found something buried in a 1987 provision that nobody used, and he was going to use it regardless of what it cost him. But that was tomorrow. Tonight he sat outside the door. They wouldn't let him through, and he kept watch the way soldiers keep watch. Not because it accomplishes anything measurable, but because some things require a body present, a witness, a refusal to let the night pass unacknowledged. The machines beeped steadily behind the doors. She was still in there, still alive, still fighting in the only way available to her, the slow, unconscious, unglamorous way of a body that hasn't been told yet that quitting is an option. Riker drank his terrible coffee and waited. And in the kennel, 3 buildings away, Rex sat facing the door and didn't sleep either. The hearing room smelled like old paper and decisions that couldn't be taken back. Riker had been there since 6:30 an hour before anyone else arrived, sitting in the back row with a printed regulation from 1987 and the specific kind of determination that only comes from having spent the night in a hospital corridor with nothing but bad coffee and guilt for company. Rex was already in the room when they brought him in, muzzled, chained, walking with the contained dignity of an animal that knows something is wrong but hasn't stopped trusting the process. His eyes found Riker's the moment he entered, and they stayed there, steady questioning, carrying something that had no business existing in a dog's face and existed there anyway. Grief. Pure and uncomplicated. The grief of something that understood loss without having the language to argue with it. Riker held the eye contact and didn't look away. The judge was a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back and the face of someone who had made hard decisions before and hadn't enjoyed any of them. The prosecution advocate was a captain with cold eyes who arranged his folders with the confidence of a man who considers this hearing a formality. The defense advocate was a young lieutenant who looked like he was attending his own execution. The behavioral expert, Dr. Carrion, sat to the side with a file thick enough to use as a weapon. This hearing will determine the fate of military working dog Rex service number K9-4471. The judge began. Following an incident on May 28th in which the animal killed 2 individuals and critically injured a third, prosecution, present your case. The captain stood. His voice had the flat, efficient quality of someone reading from a verdict he's already written. The facts are not in dispute. MWD Rex engaged in lethal force against 3 individuals, resulting in 2 fatalities and 1 critical injury. The individuals were hostile combatants, yes. The level of force employed by the animal exceeded every established protocol. Military working dogs are trained to neutralize threats, to restrain, to deter, to create compliance. Rex did not restrain. Rex did not deter. Rex killed. Twice. Comprehensively. The conditioning that distinguishes a military asset from a weapon has broken down irreparably. We recommend immediate euthanization. The word landed in the room the way those words do, not loudly, but with weight. Rex didn't react. Either he didn't understand, or he understood completely and had moved past the point where reacting served any purpose. His eyes had drifted from Riker to the door, the same door watching he'd been doing since they took him from the spot where Lena had collapsed. Defense, the judge said. The young lieutenant stood and presented his case with the careful precision of someone navigating a minefield in dress shoes. Context. Handler threat. Incapacitation. Exceptional circumstances. His voice stayed professional, but his argument had the feel of a man who knows he's losing and is trying to lose gracefully. The prosecution interrupted twice. The judge allowed it both times. Then Dr. Carrion spoke. MWD Rex's psychological profile has been exemplary for 8 years, she said. 0 incidents of handler-directed aggression. 0 failures in threat discrimination. 0 instances of excessive force during operational service. What occurred on May 28th was a singular psychological break triggered by extreme stress and the direct perception that his handler was dying in front of him. "Can you guarantee it won't happen again?" the judge asked. Dr. Carrion paused. A real pause. The kind that means the answer is complicated, and the honest version is harder to say than the comfortable version. No. What I can tell you is that Rex's bond with his handler is extraordinarily unusual even by the standards of working dog partnerships. The trauma of witnessing her incapacitation may have created a permanent psychological framework, protect her at any cost, by any means regardless of conditioning. That kind of imprinting doesn't reset. It can be managed. It cannot be erased. "So he's dangerous," the captain said. "He's loyal," Dr. Carrion replied. "The distinction matters. It matters considerably less when the loyalty produces 2 fatalities." The back door opened. Everyone turned. Brennan walked in, first dress uniform, spine straight, the quiet kid from Montana wearing an expression that had nothing quiet about it. Thompson and Collins flanked him, identically dressed, identically resolved. "You're not authorized to be here," the captain said. "We're witnesses," Brennan said. "We were present during the incident. We have testimony directly relevant to this proceeding. You're trainees. You have no standing. Then we'll wait in the hallway, and we'll be loud enough that you'll conduct this hearing through the noise." Brennan didn't move. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. That dog saved 12 lives. We owe him 10 minutes. The judge studied him for a long moment. Something moved across her face that wasn't quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. "Make it brief." Brennan stepped forward, and he spoke the way people speak when they've thought very carefully about every word and decided to use them all anyway. He described May 28th without embellishment, without emotion, just the clean sequence of events. The gunfire, the order to evacuate Lena, staying behind the locked door, what they watched through the glass. His voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. "We know what Rex did," the captain interrupted. "The medical examiner's report." "You know what he did," Brennan said. "You don't know why. And the why is the entire point." He looked at the captain directly. Rex didn't attack because he's vicious. He attacked because 12 men who should have been in that room with her were locked behind a door watching her die. He did what we couldn't do. He did what every single person in this room would have done with a weapon in their hand and nothing left to lose. His voice didn't rise, but the weight behind it did. If I had been in that room armed or not, I would have done exactly what he did. Would you court-martial me for that? Or would you call it justified force? The captain's jaw tightened. "You're not a dog." "No, but he made the same calculation any of us would have made. His handler's life was worth more than the threat in front of him. That's not a failure of training. That's the only possible correct answer given the circumstances." The judge raised her hand. "That's enough, ma'am." Riker was already standing, already moving forward, the printed regulation in his hand. "There's a provision. 1987 updated 2003, rarely invoked. Military working dogs can be retired under exceptional circumstances if their handler requests it and if their service record justifies early retirement. Rex has 8 years of exemplary service. 47 confirmed hostile neutralizations. 0 friendly fire incidents. 0 prior failures." He set the paper on the table. His record justifies retirement. What happened on May 28th doesn't negate 8 years. It's one moment, an impossible moment, where every available option was wrong, and he chose the one that kept 12 people alive. "He killed 2 people, the captain said. "He killed 2 people who were actively murdering a United States military instructor." Riker's voice stayed controlled, but just barely. In any other context, with any other type of combatant, we'd be writing a commendation. The only reason we're in this room is because he's a dog, and somewhere in our regulations, we decided that what an animal does in defense of its handler is a malfunction rather than a choice. He looked at the judge. "I was there, ma'am. I watched her go down. I watched her tell us to leave. I watched Rex make the only decision that mattered, Not the easy one, not the safe one. The right one. You don't euthanize an 8-year veteran for making the right decision under the worst possible circumstances. The room went still. Rex was watching Riker now. Had been since he started speaking. The muzzle hit his mouth but not his eyes, and his eyes were doing something complicated that Riker felt in his chest like a physical pressure. The judge looked at Rex for a long moment. Then she looked at her file. Then she looked at the captain, who had the expression of a man who knows the ground has shifted under him and hasn't decided yet how to respond. "This hearing is in recess," she said. "I need 2 hours." She stood and left. The room exhaled collectively. The advocates gathered their papers. Dr. Carrion closed her file and caught Riker's eye across the room, and whatever she saw in his face made her nod once small private meaning, something. Riker walked to Rex, slowly keeping his hands visible, crouching down to the dog's level rather than standing over him. Rex's ears went back. Not aggression, uncertainty. The uncertainty of a creature whose entire world had been reduced to one person, and that person wasn't here. "She's alive," Riker said quietly. "You did good. You saved her. She's alive because of you, and she's going to be okay. I need you to hold on a little longer." Rex's tail moved. One small tentative wag like a question he wasn't sure he had the right to ask. "Yeah," Riker said. "I promise." He hoped desperately he wasn't lying. At 1400, the judge returned. She looked like the 2 hours had cost her something. She sat, arranged her papers, and spoke without preamble. MWD Rex clearly exceeded training parameters. He employed lethal force in a manner inconsistent with his conditioning. She paused. The circumstances were also exceptional in a way that this proceeding must acknowledge. His handler was incapacitated and under direct lethal threat. The personnel who might otherwise have intervened were physically prevented from doing so. Another pause longer. However, the law regarding working dogs who demonstrate this level of aggression is clear. I cannot in good conscience return an animal capable of this level of violence to active service. Riker's stomach dropped. Therefore, the judge continued, and the word landed differently than he expected. MWD Rex is hereby retired from active duty, effective immediately. He will not be returned to operational service. He will not be reassigned. She looked directly at the prosecution advocate, whose expression had shifted from satisfied to wary. He will be placed in the permanent custody of his handler, instructor Lena Cross, upon her medical clearance to receive him. Until that time, he will remain in qualified foster care with personnel who understand his psychological state. The captain stood. "Your Honor, we recommended euthanization, not—" "I heard your recommendation, Captain. I chose a different path." Her voice had the specific finality of someone who has made a decision and has no interest in revisiting it. 8 years of exemplary service is not erased by one incident, however extreme. Rex earned retirement. He did not earn execution. She gathered her files. "This hearing is concluded." She left before the captain could finish forming his objection. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Brennan laughed, a short, disbelieving sound, the kind that escapes before the brain gives permission. Thompson put both hands over his face. Collins just nodded slowly, like a man confirming something he'd been arguing with himself about. They'd won. Against the regulation, against the protocol, against the institutional machinery designed to process problems by eliminating them, they'd won. A handler came to take Rex to his temporary placement. The dog resisted pulling toward the door. The wrong door, the one that didn't lead anywhere. She was but the one his instincts pointed toward anyway. "She's not there," Riker said. He crouched in front of Rex one more time, holding those grief-filled eyes. "But you'll see her again. She's coming back. She's tougher than anyone who's ever tried to break her, and you know that better than any of us. So you wait, and we'll make sure she comes back to you. Okay." Rex looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then he turned and went with the handler. Didn't fight it anymore. Just walked forward the way soldiers walk when they've been given a reason to keep going, even if the destination isn't clear yet. Riker watched him go and felt something release in his chest. Not relief exactly, but the first reduction of a pressure he'd been carrying since the moment those gunshots cracked the air in the training yard. They went back to the hospital. Got the same nurse, the same policy, the same wall. This time, Riker was ready for it. "She has no immediate family," he said. "Someone has to make decisions about her care, her recovery, her legal representation during the investigation. Since she has no next of kin, that responsibility defaults to her designated chain of command. We're her unit. We're asking to be recognized as her designated representatives." The nurse looked skeptical in the specific way of someone whose skepticism is weakening. "That's not exactly standard procedure." Nothing about this situation is standard procedure. A training instructor was attacked by professional operatives on a military base. She has no living family, and she's unconscious in your ICU without a single person authorized to advocate for her. That's the situation. We're trying to fix it. The doctor appeared 20 minutes later, reviewed what Riker had presented, and after the kind of deliberation that involves looking at the ceiling for a long moment, authorized 5-minute individual visits during approved hours. Riker went first. The ICU room was very quiet, in the way that rooms with machines in them are quiet. Not silent, but full of sounds that belong to function rather than life. Lena, in the center of it, looked smaller than she had any right to look. Both legs elevated, both legs destroyed. Her face completely relaxed, the controlled mask gone, just a 22-year-old who had been through something no person her age should have been through. He sat in the chair beside her and talked. Told her Rex was safe. Told her they'd fought for him. Told her they weren't going anywhere. Told her she needed to wake up because they still had things to learn, and she was the only one who could teach them. His voice cracked twice. He didn't stop. When the nurse came to end the 5 minutes, he stood, looked at her face one last time. "Don't give up," he said. "We just found you. That's not enough time." He walked out. Martinez went in. Then Thompson. Then Brennan, who sat for all 5 minutes and apparently said very little, which was for Brennan the most eloquent thing possible. One by one, 12 men said things to an unconscious woman that they'd never said to anyone conscious, which is sometimes the only way humans can tell the truth about what something costs them. That night, the 12 of them gathered in the barracks, and the man in the dark suit walked in 20 minutes later. None of them had been expecting him. He entered without knocking, which said something about what kind of authority he carried, and he sat down without being invited, which said something about how little he cared what they thought about that. "I need to speak with Donovan alone," he said. "Whatever you have to say to him, you can say to all of us," Martinez said. "We stopped operating individually about 48 hours ago." The man looked at Martinez for a moment. Then, apparently deciding the battle wasn't worth the energy, he looked at Riker. "Lena Cross isn't her real name." The room went completely still. "It's her 4th identity in 6 years. He pulled out a tablet, swiped through encrypted files that the trainees couldn't read from their distance, but could feel the weight of. Before Cross, she was Sarah Mitchell. Before Mitchell, Elena Reyes. Before that, something even I don't have clearance to access. He turned the tablet so Riker could see the photo, Lena's face unmistakable, but younger and harder, standing in tactical gear, beside people whose faces had been redacted out of existence. She was recruited at 16. Tested off every available chart for spatial awareness, threat prediction, psychological analysis. They put her through a program that has no official name and no official record. In 6 years of active operation, she survived 43 hostile engagements. Completed 39 missions that prevented events most people will never know almost happened. "She's an assassin," Collins said from the back of the room. "She's a surgeon," the man said without looking away from Riker. "She removes problems before they become catastrophes. There's a professional distinction even if the moral one is harder to navigate." He pulled up another file. 2 years ago, someone inside the agency sold her identity to hostile networks. She had 48 hours before every enemy she'd made across 6 years came looking. We gave her a new face, new name, new cover. Buried her so thoroughly that even the people who wanted her dead couldn't find her. He paused. "They found her anyway." Someone sold her out again, Riker said. Someone with access to our placement protocols, our safe house infrastructure, our cover assignment procedures. The man's jaw tightened the first crack in the professional composure. Someone on that base is feeding information to the network that wants her dead. The 3 operatives were the opening move. They'll send more when they confirm she survived. What do you want from us? Riker asked. Your eyes. You have access. She doesn't have proximity to people she can't observe from a hospital bed and a reason to be watching that won't raise flags. Someone in your immediate environment is feeding intelligence to her enemies. It could be an officer, support staff, another trainee. I need you to notice what professionals would walk past because it doesn't fit their pattern of what to look for. You want trainees to run surveillance on a military base, Martinez said. I want her unit to protect their instructor. The man stood. Those 3 operatives were not the end. Whoever sent them knows she's alive, knows she's immobile, knows the security around her is focused on external threats. That's an opportunity for someone patient enough to wait for it. His eyes moved around the room. One more thing. That dog of hers, Rex, he wasn't trained as a service animal. He was trained as a covert elimination asset. Stealth approach, soft tissue targeting, no evidence of mechanical force. The program was retired 3 years ago when it got too effective. Rex was the last active unit. The silence in the room had a different texture now. You're saying what we watched through that window, Riker said slowly, wasn't him breaking down. I'm saying that was him doing exactly what he was built to do. The question you should be asking yourself is why they paired the most lethal dog in the program with their most valuable human asset. The man moved toward the door. And what that tells you about how dangerous her life has actually been every day since she was 16 years old. He left. Nobody spoke for nearly a full minute. Then Thompson said very quietly, "We mocked her. Day 1. We stood in that yard, and we mocked her." "Yeah," Riker said. "She was 16 years old when they recruited her. 16. And we stood there calling Rex a comfort dog and asking if she filed good paperwork. Nobody had an answer for that. Some things don't deserve responses. They deserve to sit in the air and be felt completely before anyone tries to put language around them. We start watching tomorrow," Riker said finally. "Shifts, rotations. We cover every angle without making it visible that we're covering anything. If someone on this base is feeding information to the people who want her dead, we find them." "And if we find them," Brennan asked, "we make sure they can't get close to her again." They coordinated through the night who would cover which areas, which hours, which observation points. It had the feel of their first real operational planning session, the first time they were applying Lena's teachings to something with genuine stakes instead of training scenarios. She'd told them assumptions kill. She'd told them that fighting is about dominance while survival is about continuing. She'd told them the enemy exploits your blindness. None of them had imagined they'd need those lessons this soon, or in this context. But then she'd also told them that real training doesn't announce itself. It just shows up, and then you find out whether you were paying attention. For 3 days they found nothing. Normal base operations, normal patterns, normal personnel going about normal work. Riker was beginning to wonder if the man in the dark suit had been pointing them at shadows when Thompson sent a message to the group at 1400 on the 4th day. "Maintenance guy. ICU corridor. Twice daily exactly, 0900 and 1700. Says he's checking HVAC. Never touches any equipment." The response from Riker came back in seconds. Description: white male 40s. 5'10". Dark hair gray at the temples. Badge reads Morrison. Base facilities. Been here 6 years. Clean record. But Thompson's next message had the weight of something that had stopped being routine. Transferred to this base 3 months ago, exactly 8 weeks before Lena's assignment. Riker read it twice. Then he put down his coffee, picked up his phone, and started moving toward the hospital. He got there 20 minutes before Morrison's 1700 appearance, found a chair with a sightline to the corridor, and opened a newspaper he had no intention of reading. Morrison arrived at 1659, not 1700. 59 minutes early because people who are careful are never exactly on time. They arrive slightly before to see what's there before what's there has time to prepare. He stood in the corridor for 5 minutes, checked his phone twice, never opened an access panel, never looked at any of the equipment he was supposedly there to service. And just before he turned to leave, his eyes moved to Lena's door. Quick practice the confirmation glance of someone checking that an asset is still in its last known position. Riker's blood went cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. He waited until Morrison rounded the corner, counted to 20, followed. Morrison went to a supply closet on the 3rd floor. Riker eased the door open a crack just enough for audio and held his phone against the gap with the recording application running before his conscious mind had fully signed off on the decision. She's still unconscious. Security is standard external focus. Morrison's voice was professional, neutral, the voice of someone who has made reports like this before. I can access the room during a routine maintenance window. Medical staff doesn't question facilities. 2 minutes make it look like equipment malfunction. Ventilator irregularity. Common enough that it won't trigger immediate investigation. A pause while he listened. Tonight. 0200. Minimal staff rotation. I'll handle it. The call ended. Riker pulled back from the door. His hands were completely steady, which surprised him because everything else inside him was not. He looked at his phone. The recording was running. He stopped it. Saved it in 3 separate locations. Then he texted the group a single line. Morrison is the leak. Planning to kill her tonight at 0200. I have him on recording. No time for channels. We handle this ourselves. The responses came back in under 30 seconds. Every single one of them, a variation of the same word. Yes. They had 8 hours. Riker looked at his phone, looked at the ceiling, looked at the corridor Morrison had just walked down. The man in the dark suit had told him to watch, had told him to notice, had told him to protect her. He hadn't said anything about what happened when watching wasn't enough anymore. But Lena had. She'd said the enemy doesn't care about your expectations. She'd said survival means continuing by whatever means the moment requires. She'd said assumptions kill, and the assumption that someone else would handle this, that the proper channels would move fast enough that the bureaucratic machinery would prioritize her life over its own timeline, was exactly the kind of assumption she'd spent 4 days trying to burn out of all of them. They had 8 hours of recording, and 12 people who owed a debt they hadn't finished paying. Riker started planning. 8 hours is a long time when you're waiting, and no time at all when you're planning. Riker spread the hospital layout across Brennan's bunk floor plans he'd pulled from the base facilities database under the pretense of checking maintenance access routes, which was either resourceful or ironic given the circumstances. The others crowded around shoulders, touching all 12 of them in a room that suddenly felt smaller than it had that morning. Morrison's pattern is consistent, Riker said. He's been running the same routine twice daily for weeks. That's not surveillance. That's confirmation checking she's still in the same room, still vulnerable, still worth the risk of an approach. He pointed to the corridor map. At 0200, the ICU runs on a skeleton staff. 2 guards both positioned at external access points. Interior corridor is monitored by camera, but not by personnel. Morrison knows this. He's been watching the rotation as carefully as we've been watching him. So he walks in during the gap, Martinez said. Maintenance uniform, facility badge, plausible reason. Medical staff doesn't question someone who belongs in the building. He gets to her room, administers whatever's in that syringe, walks out. By the time anyone notices, he's 3 buildings away and she's gone. The word gone sat in the air like something with weight. We have the recording, Collins said. Why not just take it to base security? Let them handle it. Because it's 1800 now. Riker looked at him directly. By the time we go through channels, report it. Get it verified. Get authorization brief. The right people generate the paperwork. It's midnight at the earliest. Morrison moves at 0200. That's a 2-hour window for something to go wrong, for someone to tip him off, for him to move early, or change approach. He shook his head. We take this to official channels tomorrow morning with Morrison in custody and the recording as supporting evidence. Tonight we handle the room. We're not law enforcement, Peterson said. We're not investigators. We're her unit." Brennan's voice was quiet and final. "That's enough." Nobody argued after that. They divided the positions with the kind of efficiency that Lena had been building in them for weeks, without any of them fully realizing it was happening. Martinez and Peterson to the hospital, immediately casual visit, extended naturally into the evening hours, one inside the ICU corridor and one in the waiting area, both with legitimate reasons to be present, and both ready to become very loud and very immovable if anyone tried to move them. Thompson and Collins, in the main corridor, maintaining what would look to any observer like an ongoing argument about something trivial. Williams and Harper at the stairwell exits. Rodriguez and Shaw watching the elevators. Riker and Brennan inside the room. "In the room," Thompson repeated. "Behind the equipment." "Yes?" "If Morrison makes it past Martinez, past Peterson, past Collins, and me past Williams at the stairs, then we're the last line," Riker said. "And we don't miss." Thompson looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded. Okay. They moved into position at 21:30, early enough to be natural, late enough to avoid the full evening visitation period. Martinez talked a reluctant nurse into allowing him to stay past hours by explaining with complete sincerity that his instructor had saved his life, and he wasn't able to sleep anyway, and he'd be very quiet and take up very little space. The nurse who had met Riker the night before and had developed a complicated relationship with the unit's persistence agreed with the resignation of someone who has stopped expecting regulations to win against this particular group of people. Peterson settled into the waiting area with a book he didn't read. Riker and Brennan slipped into Lena's room during a shift change, positioned themselves behind the monitoring equipment on the far wall, and waited. Waiting is its own kind of discipline. Riker had never been good at it. He was a person built for motion, for action, for the forward momentum of doing something, rather than enduring something. But he stood in the dark behind the equipment, and he breathed steadily, and he thought about what Lena had said about survival versus fighting. That survival is about continuing, not about winning, and that the discipline required to hold still, when everything in you wants to move, is often the hardest combat skill to develop. She'd been right. She was usually right. He was still adjusting to that. At 01:30, his phone vibrated once. Martinez. One word, moving. Riker's hand touched Brennan's arm. Brennan was already completely still in the specific way of someone who has just shifted from waiting to ready. At 01:47, they heard the corridor. Morrison's voice professional and unhurried. A maintenance issue, he was saying. Automated alert on the oxygen supply. Should take 2 minutes. The guard's response, the brief skeptical pause, the check of the tablet Morrison showed them, the waved clearance. The sound of the ICU door opening, then the specific near silence of a person moving with practiced care through a space they've mentally rehearsed. The door to Lena's room opened. Morrison entered and closed it behind him. His movements in the dark were efficient. Not rushed, not hesitant. The movements of someone who has done difficult things in difficult places before and has made peace with what that requires. He crossed to her bedside. His hand went to his pocket. Step away from her. Riker's voice came out completely level, which surprised even him. Morrison froze. The lights came on Brennan at the switch, already moving, already closing the distance. Morrison's hand came out of his pocket, fast, going for something that wasn't the syringe, and Brennan hit him before whatever it was cleared his jacket. The tackle drove Morrison sideways away from the bed, away from Lena, away from everything that mattered, and the syringe skittered across the floor and came to rest against the far wall. Morrison was trained. That became apparent immediately. He fought back with the compact economical violence of someone who learned to hurt people professionally short elbows, pressure points, attempting to create space rather than overpower. He nearly got it. For 3 seconds, it was genuinely unclear how this was going to resolve. Then Brennan got his weight fully committed, drove Morrison face down, and pinned both arms behind him with the mechanical certainty of a man who has just decided this is ending now. Don't, Brennan said. One word. Morrison stopped moving. The guards hit the door 30 seconds later, weapons up. Thompson and Collins came through behind them, both of them slightly out of breath from moving fast. both of them looking at the scene with the expression of people who had prepared for this and are still startled by its reality. This man entered a secure patient's room at 0200 with an unauthorized syringe and a secondary implement. Riker said, his voice carrying the careful control of someone presenting evidence rather than making accusations. "I have a recording of him planning this earlier today. He's connected to the network that attacked Instructor Cross on May 28th. He held up his phone. "I'd like to play it for you now." He played it. The recording was clear. Morrison's voice, unmistakable, describing access and timing and method with the calm professionalism of a man who considers murder a logistical problem rather than a moral one. The guards looked at each other. One of them reached for his radio. Morrison, still face down under Brennan's weight, turned his head and found Riker's eyes. The panic he'd shown when the lights came on was gone. What replaced it was something colder, more considered, the expression of a man recalculating from a new position and arriving at conclusions that aren't good for anyone in the room. "You have no idea what you've done," he said quietly. "The people I work for don't stop. They don't forgive. They don't adjust the timeline because one asset got compromised. They send more, better ones. And now they know you're in the way, which means you just put yourself in the same category as her." "Get him up," the guard said. They hauled Morrison to his feet, cuffed him, began the arrest protocol. Morrison didn't resist anymore. His eyes stayed on Riker until they cleared the door steady, promising nothing good, delivering a message that had no words but needed none. The door closed. Riker stood in the room with Brennan and the evidence bag containing the syringe and the secondary implement, which turned out to be a device he didn't have a name for and didn't want one, and he felt the adrenaline crash hit him all at once, hands starting to shake. Now that the shaking was no longer a liability, legs suddenly aware they'd been holding a position for hours. "We good?" Brennan asked. Riker looked at Lena. Her monitors steady her breathing unchanged entirely, unaware of what had just happened in her room while she slept. "Yeah," he said. "We're good." The man in the dark suit arrived 31 minutes later. He walked in, looked at the evidence bag, looked at Riker's phone, looked at 12 trainees who had just dismantled an operation that his agency had been building toward for 2 months, and his expression moved through several things before arriving at something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but was in the neighborhood. "I told you to watch," he said. He was going to kill her tonight. Riker met his eyes. Watching wasn't going to be sufficient. "You could have called me." With what time he was moving at 0200. Any call I made at 1800 was going to spend 4 hours in the system before anyone with authority to act on it was in position. Riker kept his voice even. "Did we get the right man?" The suit was quiet for a moment. Then, with the reluctant precision of someone who respects competence even when it embarrasses him. "Morrison has been a suspected conduit for 18 months. We had circumstantial evidence and a pattern, but nothing actionable. What you recorded tonight gives us everything we need to roll up the entire network." He looked at the recording on Riker's phone. "You did reckless. You did dangerous. You did exactly the kind of cowboy operation that gets people killed in the field." A pause. "You also did it correctly, which is the most annoying possible outcome." He left with the evidence and presumably a great deal to do. Riker stayed, pulled the chair close to Lena's bed, and sat with his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands, and just breathed for a minute, which was all he allowed himself. "We got him," he said eventually to her, to the room, to whatever part of her was still listening even under the sedation. "Morrison is done. The network, they're working on it. You're safe for tonight." He leaned back. "I know you can't hear this. Maybe you can. I've stopped having confident opinions about what's possible." His voice dropped. "Rex is okay. They're keeping him in foster care until you're cleared to take him back. He's waiting for you. He's been waiting for you every second since they took him out of that yard." The monitors beeped. Steady, constant, performing the function of reassurance that no person in the room could. "You need to wake up," Riker said. "Not for us, for yourself. Because you have a dog who broke every rule he ever learned to keep you breathing, and he deserves to have you come back to him." He paused. And because we're a disaster without you. Genuinely. We're 12 people who think we learned something, and we probably learned about 60% of it, and the other 40% is going to get someone killed if you don't come back and fix it. At 0347, Lena's fingers moved. Riker almost missed it. Almost convinced himself it was a machine artifact, a reflex, the random firing of a nervous system doing maintenance. But then her hand moved again, deliberate searching, reaching for something that wasn't there. He leaned forward. Lena, can you hear me? Her eyes moved under closed lids. The monitors shifted nothing alarming, just the subtle change in rhythm that meant something was changing behind the surface. Rex is safe, he said. Your whole unit is here. None of us are leaving. Her fingers stilled. Then slowly the tension in her face changed. Not waking, not conscious, but something in the architecture of her expression shifted like a person who has heard something they needed to hear and can now rest differently because of it. Brennan arrived at 0400 for the shift change, took one look at Riker's face and pointed at the door. Sleep. She moved. Her hand. I know. The nurse told me. They're monitoring it. Brennan sat down in the chair. I've got her. Go. Riker made it to the barracks, made it to his bunk, and was unconscious in under 2 minutes, the specific collapsed sleep of a body that has been running on adrenaline and moral obligation for 20 hours straight, and has finally run out of both. He dreamed of the training yard, of Lena standing in the center of 12 men who'd already decided she couldn't touch them, of the absolute stillness in her before the fight started, the calm that wasn't emptiness, but its opposite, a person so completely present in the moment that nothing outside it could reach her. He woke to his phone buzzing. Brennan's text read, "She moved again. On purpose. Nurses running checks." Riker was dressed and moving in 90 seconds. He took the stairs 3 at a time. He found Brennan in the corridor outside the ICU, with the particular expression of a man who has been managing Hope carefully and is now having difficulty with the management. "Doctor says her brain activity is increasing," Brennan said. "She's coming up naturally. Could be hours, could be today." Riker put his hand on the wall and leaned against it and breathed. "Hours," he said. "Maybe less. Her responses are strong. Doctor said that's significant." It was 3 hours and 23 minutes, as it turned out. At 15:23, Lena's eyes opened. She looked at the ceiling first, then at the machines. Then, with the slow, deliberate focus of someone navigating through layers of pain and medication and the general disorientation of consciousness, returning from a long distance at Riker. "Where?" The word came out barely formed, dry and rough as gravel. "Hospital. You're safe. The attack was 6 days ago. You've been unconscious since." Her eyes moved around the room, cataloging, assessing, even now, even like this, the threat assessment instinct running before anything else came fully online. Then something in her face changed. Priority override. "Rex. Safe. Foster care. He's waiting for you." "He..." Her throat closed. She swallowed. Tried again. "He saved me." "He destroyed everyone in that room," Riker said. "And then he sat next to you and waited until you told him to stop. And then he put his head on your hand and didn't move." Something moved across her face. Relief and grief and love and loss, all occupying the same space, which is what happens when you care about something enough that its safety and your separation from it feel equally devastating. "Trainees," she said. "All fine. All here. You got us out in time. Morrison." The name arrived flat and certain, like something she'd known was coming and had been waiting to confirm. Riker's breath stopped for a second. "You knew." "Suspected. Pattern in the maintenance rotation was wrong. Timing was too consistent." Her eyes focused on him with an effort that was visible. "Did you..." "We caught him last night. He came for you at 200. We were in the room." He met her gaze. "He's in custody. The recording went to the suit. They're rolling up the network." A long silence. Her monitor stayed steady. "You stayed," she said. Not a question. The kind of statement that contains more weight than most paragraphs. Of course we stayed. Smart would be far away from me. Yeah, well, he almost smiled. Turns out we're not that smart. We're stubborn. You taught us that. The corner of her mouth moved. Pain or something else hard to distinguish when the distinction barely matters. Hurts, she said. I know, I'm sorry. Not your fault. Feels like it is. Her hand moved toward him, slow, deliberate, trailing the IV line. He caught it carefully, mindful of everything attached to it, and she gripped his hand with a strength that had no business existing in someone in her condition, and existed anyway. You tried to pull me out, she said. Saw you, before the door closed. I should have moved faster. Should have, would have died, both of us. Her grip tightened fractionally. You did right. Listened, followed the order, lived. Her eyes held his. That's the lesson. That's all it ever was. He didn't trust his voice enough to use it, so he just held her hand and let the monitors fill the silence. She drifted back under after another few minutes. Not unconsciousness, just the sedation pulling her back down now that she'd done what she needed to do. Her grip loosened gradually. Her face settled back into the exhausted peace of someone who has been fighting for a long time and has finally been given permission to stop just for now, just until she's ready to start again. Riker sat there until the nurse asked him to leave. Then he went to the corridor and told Martinez, who told Thompson, who texted the group. She woke up. She's okay. She knew about Morrison. She's already planning her comeback. The responses came back in seconds. William sent something that wasn't a word exactly, just a sound transcribed into text, the kind you make when something you were holding releases. Brennan sent nothing, which from Brennan meant everything. Collins sent, "Tell her we're sorry. Tell her we're ready." 3 days later, Commander Wells called Riker into his office, which was either a punishment or a promotion. And in the military, the difference between those two things is sometimes a matter of perspective. Wells didn't waste time. He laid out the situation with the efficiency of a man who has been doing this for 30 years and has stopped decorating difficult truths with unnecessary language. Court-martial was a possibility. Medals were also a possibility. The political reality was that both were awkward and silence was convenient, which meant they were probably looking at a formal reprimand attached to an informal acknowledgement that the reprimand was theater. What you did was reckless, Wells said. Yes, sir. You took 12 trainees and ran an unauthorized surveillance and interdiction operation on a military base. Yes, sir. You assaulted a base employee, however justified the assault. Yes, sir. You caught a traitor who'd been operating under our noses for 18 months and saved the life of one of the most operationally significant assets this branch has produced in a decade. Wells looked at him across the desk. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer. What should I do with you? Riker didn't hesitate. Whatever is right for Instructor Cross, sir. Not what's convenient for anyone's career. She paid for this outcome. She should be the one who benefits from whatever decision you make. Wells studied him for a long moment. Then something shifted in the granite of his face, not warmth exactly, but recognition. The look of a man seeing something he'd stopped expecting to find. She's being medically retired, he said. Effective immediately. The damage is too extensive for return to active duty in any operational capacity. Full disability, honorable discharge. Riker felt the floor shift. Sir, she can recover. She just needs time. 18 months of physical therapy. Multiple surgeries. Estimated 60 to 70% mobility recovery in the best-case projection. Wells's voice wasn't cruel. It was the specific gentleness of someone delivering something that doesn't improve with softening. She'll walk. She won't run again. Won't fight again. Won't operate in the field again. Her career as she understood it is over. The silence had the texture of something permanent. What about teaching? Riker said. Wells looked at him. What about it? She was already teaching from a wheelchair. 8 weeks of training and we're progressing faster than any unit in recent record. You said that yourself, sir. Her mobility isn't what made her effective. Her mind is what made her effective. Riker leaned forward. Give her the position permanently. Teaching, curriculum development. Let her be what she already is, the best instructor any of us have ever encountered, without making her pretend she's something she used to be. Wells was quiet for a long time. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. I need you to do something first. Convince her. He set the folder on the desk. I've spoken with her attending physician. She's refusing the permanent position. Says she can't teach from a wheelchair. Says she's a liability. Says she's done. His eyes were direct. You have 2 weeks to change her mind. If she agrees to a modified program, I'll authorize it. If she refuses, you accept reassignment without protest. And if we refuse the reassignment, then I court-martial all of you, which I'd prefer not to do, and which would be a tremendous waste of people this country is eventually going to need. He paused. 2 weeks, Donovan. Go convince a proud woman that broken legs don't mean a broken life. That's your mission. Riker picked up the folder. It was, he thought, the hardest assignment she had ever given him, and she hadn't even given it. But it felt like hers. It felt like the kind of test she would design, no right answer, no clean path, just a person who needed to hear something true, and 12 people who owed her enough to find a way to say it. He walked out of Wells's office into the thin afternoon light and took a breath that reached all the way down. Then he pulled out his phone and texted the group. She's being medically retired. She thinks she's done. We have 2 weeks to convince her she's wrong. Ideas. Brennan's response came back before Riker had finished reading his own message. We show up, every day. We ask questions. We make her teach without giving her a choice. We make it impossible to believe she has nothing left to give. Martinez. That's manipulative. Brennan. That's survival. She taught us that. Riker read the exchange, put his phone in his pocket, started walking toward the hospital because 2 weeks started now, and Lena Cross had spent 6 years being impossible to find, and he was done letting her disappear, even from herself, especially from herself. The first morning, Riker showed up at Lena's hospital room with a tactical question he already knew the answer to. She didn't even look up from the window. I told the nurse not to let you in. She let me in anyway. He pulled up the chair. The redirect technique. When the opponent has superior reach and commits early. I tried it on Martinez yesterday, and he still tagged me. What am I doing wrong? Ask your new instructor. Don't have one. We refused reassignment. Now she looked at him. The sharpness in her eyes hadn't gone anywhere. If anything, 2 weeks of lying in a hospital bed with nothing but her own thoughts had made it more concentrated, the way a fire gets hotter when you compress it. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Probably. He didn't move. The redirect. What am I missing? I'm not your instructor anymore. Look at me. Her hands gestured at the wheelchair, the casts, the machinery still tethered to her arm. I'm done. I can't demonstrate. Can't spar. Can't run an exercise. Can't do a single thing an instructor needs to do. You can talk. You can watch. You can correct. He leaned forward. The redirect isn't about strength anyway. You told us that. It's about timing and angles. So tell me, what angle am I missing? She stared at him with the expression of someone who is losing an argument they haven't decided to have yet. You're dropping your shoulder before you move, she said finally. You're telegraphing. Your opponent sees it coming and adjusts before you commit. So how do I fix it? Shoulders level until the exact moment of contact. Move from your core. The redirect should feel like opening a door, not pushing against a wall. She demonstrated with her upper body fluid, instinctive muscle memory, running clean, despite everything that had happened to the rest of her. Like that. Like that. Riker stood. Thanks. I'll try it this afternoon. Might have more questions tomorrow. You don't need to come back. I answered it. Yeah, well. He headed for the door. We tend to generate new questions when we practice without supervision. It's a design flaw. He paused at the threshold. See you tomorrow, instructor. I'm not. but he was already gone. Brennan came the next day with questions about psychological disruption. Thompson, the day after, claiming he couldn't understand a timing concept without her explanation. Martinez and Collins arrived together on day 4 and described a training problem so badly with such strategic incompetence that Lena got frustrated enough to walk them through the entire solution just to make them stop getting it wrong. By day 7, she stopped saying she wasn't their instructor when they walked in. By day 10, she was assigning them work small at first, then larger, then specific, and demanding, in the way that meant she was actually thinking about their development again, rather than just answering questions to end the visit. On day 12, she said it out loud. "You're doing this on purpose." Riker, who had drawn that afternoon's rotation, looked up with the practiced innocence of someone who has been doing something on purpose for 12 consecutive days. "Doing what?" "Forcing me to stay engaged. Making me teach without letting me decide not to." Her voice had an edge, but underneath the edge was something else. Something that had been dormant and was now recognizing itself again. "You think if you keep showing up with problems, I won't be able to stop solving them. Is it working?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," she said, "and I hate that it's working." "You hate that you still care," Riker said. "That's different from it not working." He pulled out the folder Wells had given him, set it on the table beside her. "Modified program. Commander Wells authorized it. You teach theory, strategy, psychology. We handle physical demonstration. You observe and correct. It's not conventional." "I can't stand for more than 5 minutes." "Then sit. You've been teaching us for 12 days from that chair, and we're better for it." He met her eyes. "You told us day 1 that people who focus on what they can't do have already lost. Were you lying, or did you mean it?" The silence stretched. He watched emotions move through her face, not the controlled, masked sequence of someone managing their expression, but the real thing, unguarded, the face of a person who is genuinely fighting with herself and hasn't decided who wins yet. "I can think," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, but the quality of the quiet had changed. "I can plan. I can teach. I can make sure 12 people who think they're prepared don't walk into a situation they're not actually ready for." She looked at him directly. "But I'm going to be harder than before, because I can't show you anymore, I can only tell you. Which means you have to be better listeners than you've been." "We can do that." "I'm going to make you hate me some days." "Too late. We already think you're extraordinary. A little hate will balance it out." He almost smiled. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow, 0600. She picked up the folder, opened it, read it with the focused attention of someone who has made a decision but wants the details before they commit to it fully. And Donovan. "Ma'am, when I said you did the right thing following the order getting out, I meant it." She didn't look up from the folder. "But I also saw you come back for me, before the door locked. I saw you try." Her voice was even controlled, giving nothing extra. "That mattered. I want you to know it mattered." Riker didn't trust himself to say anything that wouldn't be too much, so he just nodded and let that be sufficient, and left before the moment could become something heavier than it needed to be. The next morning, at exactly 600, all 12 of them stood outside her door in a line that was straighter than it needed to be, which was the only way they knew how to say what they didn't have words for. She was already in the corridor. Wheelchair, military tracksuit, tablet on her lap, expression that promised they were about to have a very educational and deeply unpleasant morning. "You're late," she said. Thompson checked his watch. "It's exactly, if you're not early, you're late. That's the first rule of the new program." Her eyes moved down the line, assessing cataloging. "Rule 2. I can't show you anymore, so you show each other. You demonstrate, you critique, you correct. I watch and tell you what you're missing. If you can't translate verbal instruction into physical execution, you don't deserve to learn it." She rolled forward slightly. Rule 3. No excuses. I'm in a wheelchair with 2 shattered legs, and I'm here at 0600. You're healthy and whole. You don't get to complain. She let that sit. Rule 4. Failure is expected. Excellence is required anyway. Now, first scenario. They worked for 2 hours. She stopped them 17 times. She saw things from her chair that they couldn't see standing angles. They were missing patterns. They were repeating without knowing it. The tiny predictive signals in each other's bodies that telegraphed movement half a second before it happened. The chair hadn't diminished what she saw. If anything, being forced to observe rather than participate had sharpened it. "She's better from the chair," Martinez said quietly during a water break. "Is that insane? She's actually better." "She's not distracted by participating," Brennan said. "She's watching everything all the time. Nothing else in the way." It was week 3 when Dr. Sarah Chen arrived, a physical therapist with kind eyes and the specific directness of someone who has spent years working with people whose pride is getting in the way of their recovery. She spoke with Lena briefly, then turned to the unit. "She asked me to involve you in her rehabilitation sessions," Dr. Chen said. "She believes it will benefit your training to understand recovery, physical and psychological, as a field skill." "I'm right here," Lena said from across the room. "Stop discussing me like I'm a case study." "Then stop trying to stand unassisted when your therapist isn't in the room," Dr. Chen said, not unkindly, but without any flexibility. "You nearly passed out yesterday. I need to be able to demonstrate. You've been demonstrating for 3 weeks from a wheelchair, and they're the most advanced unit I've seen in this facility. The demonstrations are not the problem. Your stubbornness is the problem." What followed was the hardest thing Riker had ever stood still for. Lena, who had taken down 12 men without raising her heart rate, struggled to cross 6 feet of floor with a walker. 3 steps in her left leg betrayed her, and she caught herself on the handles with both hands and held there, breathing through something that wasn't just physical pain. 5 steps. She made 5 before Dr. Chen called it. 5, Lena said. Her voice was flat and contained. "I could do 50 before—" She stopped. Didn't finish. Didn't need to. "And tomorrow you'll do 6, Dr. Chen said. "Progress isn't linear. Some days you'll surprise yourself. Some days your body will remind you what it's been through. What matters is the direction, not the speed." After Dr. Chen left, the room was quiet in the way of people who have witnessed something private and are trying to handle that respectfully. Lena spoke first. "Now you know. Your instructor is currently weaker than someone learning to walk for the first time. Still think I'm qualified?" "Yes," Brennan said. Immediately. No hesitation. "Because you just did something harder than any combat drill we've run. You fought your own body, your own pain, your own pride, and you did it knowing we were watching. That's not weakness." He looked at her steadily. "That's the most courage I've ever seen in one room." Lena looked at him for a long moment. Something in her face shifted, not breaking, but opening the way a window opens to let in air that was always there but hasn't been allowed in. "Training resumes tomorrow," she said. 0600. We're covering psychological warfare. Wear comfortable clothes. It's going to be a long day. Week 6 brought the first real crisis. They were working on close-quarters disarm scenarios. Collins, who learned through seeing rather than hearing, asked Lena to demonstrate. "Just show us," he said. "Some things you need to see." The room went quiet in the way it does when someone has said the true wrong thing. Lena's hands tightened on the wheelchair arms. Her voice came out controlled, but the control was expensive. You could see what it cost. "I explained it. If you weren't listening, I was listening, but you showed us everything before. That's how I learn." Collins's voice was respectful, but didn't retreat. "You're refusing to teach us properly because you can't stand up long enough to—" "Just because what?" The crack in her voice was real, not theatrical, not strategic. Real. The sound of a person who has been holding something together for weeks and just felt the first fracture. "Because I can't stand long enough. Because my legs are held together with hardware and hope. Because I'm broken." "Is that what you were going to say?" Collins stepped back. "I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly that. You want the instructor you had before. The one who could fight all of you and win. The one who moved and you couldn't follow. Well, Her voice shook once, then steadied. That person is gone. This is what's left. If that's not enough, request a transfer. I'm sure Commander Wells can find someone who meets your standards. She left before anyone could respond, wheeling toward the corridor door with the compressed urgency of someone who needs to be alone before something escapes that they're not ready to share. Riker grabbed Peterson's arm before he could follow. Let her go. I know. Let her go. Collins stood in the center of the room, looking like he'd just accidentally destroyed something irreplaceable and was trying to figure out if it could be repaired. I didn't mean it the way it came out, he said quietly. I know you didn't. Riker looked at him. But she's been fighting to stay useful, to justify her place here, to convince herself she still matters every single day for 6 weeks. And what you just said confirmed every fear she's been fighting. His voice wasn't angry, just direct. You don't fix this with words. You fix it with what you do next. He found Lena in the courtyard wheelchair, angled to the far corner, face turned away from the building. She didn't tell him to leave, which he took as permission. Collins is an idiot, he said. Collins is right. Her voice was flat and tired. I can't show you anymore. I can only talk. And some things some students need to see. Collins learns by watching. He doesn't need to watch you. He needs to watch someone. We demonstrate on each other. You correct from the chair. Riker sat on the bench beside her. You taught us that physical strength is the least important part of survival. That brains beat brawn. That the person who controls the room is the person who sees what everyone else misses. He waited until she looked at him. Were you teaching us? Or were you also trying to convince yourself? The question landed and stayed. Both, she said after a long time. I was doing both. Then believe it the same way for yourself that you believed it for us. He leaned forward. You don't need perfect legs to be the most effective instructor on this base. You need to be exactly what you already are, someone who sees 17 moves ahead while we're still figuring out move 2. That's not in your legs. That was never in your legs. She wiped her eyes quickly, efficiently, like someone completing a task. I'm going to be harder on you when we go back in there. Good. I mean it. If I can't demonstrate, you have to be better listeners. I'm not tolerating the same mistakes twice. Understood. And Collins needs to write up every technique I've taught in documented form. Visual learners need references. He should have built that already. Riker almost smiled. I'll tell him. Tell him tonight. I want it on my tablet by 0600 tomorrow. Yes, ma'am. She looked at him sideways. You're not going to let me quit, are you? No, ma'am. Even if I order you to. Especially then. Something in her face settled. Not happy, exactly. Not relieved, exactly. But resolved. The expression of someone who has been fighting against something and has just decided to fight with it instead. Collins's documentation arrived at 0543 the next morning. 47 pages, meticulously organized, every technique from multiple angles with annotated corrections and observations from 8 weeks of training. Lena read it for 20 minutes before the session started and didn't say anything about it, which was the highest compliment available to her at that particular moment. The training transformed. Students learned faster because they could reference the documentation. Lena taught harder because the documentation freed her from repetition and let her push into territory that required real understanding rather than rote execution. The unit tightened in ways that stopped feeling like training and started feeling like something earned. Week 10. Commander Wells came to observe. He watched them run 3 scenarios. He made no expressions, took no notes, gave nothing away. Afterward, he pulled Lena aside, and the conversation was brief. I've been doing this 30 years, he said. I've never seen a unit progress at this rate. Never seen trainees this cohesive, this adaptive. They're exceptional students. They have an exceptional teacher. He handed her a folder. Medical board cleared you for limited permanent duty. Not field work, not operations. Instruction curriculum development program design. He met her eyes. if you want it." Lena opened the folder. "Read it." Her hands were steady. "When do they graduate?" "Final evaluation in 10 days. If they pass, they move to advanced training. If not, they repeat the course." "They'll pass. I believe you." Wells paused. "Do you accept the position?" Lena looked through the window at her unit running their cool-down 12 men pushing each other, calling out corrections, laughing at a mistake someone made, and immediately helping them fix it. 12 people who had refused to let her disappear. Who had shown up every morning whether she deserved it or not. Who had turned her worst weeks into something that had accidentally become the most meaningful work she'd ever done. "Yes," she said. "I accept." The final evaluation ran 3 days and was designed, as Wells put it, to break people who could be broken. It didn't break them. They moved through hostile scenarios with the fluid efficiency of a unit that had learned to think together, not identically, but complementarily, each person covering what the others couldn't see, each decision informed by weeks of being pushed past their own assumptions. On the 3rd day, the evaluators scored them. Top marks across every category. Highest composite evaluation in 15 years. Graduation day arrived with the particular brightness that significant days carry, not because the light is different, but because you're paying attention in a way that ordinary days don't demand. Lena wore her dress uniform for the first time since the attack. She sat in her wheelchair at the front of the assembly, and she looked like herself, sharp and still, and exactly as dangerous as she had always been, just in a different shape than before. Wells spoke. Other officers spoke. And then it was her turn. She rolled to the podium and looked out at 12 men who were not the same people who had walked into Training Yard 7 12 weeks ago. "3 months ago you stood in a yard and looked at me," she said. And every single calculation your brain ran came back the same answer: not enough. Too small, too young, too female, too limited. She let the words sit. "You were running on assumptions, and assumptions, as we all know by now, kill." She looked at them one by one. What you got wrong wasn't the observation. What you got wrong was confusing what you could see with what was true. She paused. "And then 3 armed professionals broke both my legs in front of you, and you watched through a locked door, and then you spent 12 weeks showing me every single day that what you can see and what is true are still 2 completely different things." The assembly was very quiet. "I lost my career on May 28th, she said. "I lost the body I'd built over 6 years of work. I lost the version of myself I'd organized my entire identity around." Her voice was steady. "What I didn't lose, what I couldn't lose because 12 stubborn, ridiculous, extraordinary people wouldn't allow. It was the part that matters, the part that sees, the part that teaches, the part that refuses to accept that broken means finished." She picked up the first certificate. "Trainee Riker Donovan." He came forward. She looked up at him as he took it. "You came in convinced that strength was something you demonstrated with your body. You leave knowing it's something you demonstrate with your choices." Her voice didn't waver. "You chose to come back through that door. You chose to stay in that corridor. You chose to fight for a dog that couldn't fight for himself. Those choices define you more than anything you could do in a training yard." She held his gaze. "I'm proud of you. Don't waste it." He took the certificate, didn't trust himself to speak, nodded once, which was everything. One by one, she called them forward. Every name, every face, every person who had become something different from what they'd arrived as. She found the specific truth for each of them. Not flattery, not formula, but the real thing. The observation of someone who had watched them closely enough to know what each one had fought through. When the last certificate was presented, Wells stepped forward with a small box. Inside was a commendation medal, not the highest honor, but a real one, earned rather than assigned. He pinned it to her uniform personally. "For redefining what service means," he said quietly, "when service is the hardest thing available." After the ceremony, families flooded in. Riker's parents were there, his father John, a veteran himself, who found Lena in the quieter corner of the assembly where Dr. Chen was reviewing her recovery notes. Instructor Cross. John Donovan's voice was rough with something that men of his generation carry without naming. "My son is standing in this room because of you. I want to thank you for that, not just for what you did on May 28th, for what you did every day after, for not letting him stay the person he was when he arrived." Lena looked at him. "He did that himself, sir. He needed someone to show him it was possible. That's what you gave him." John's jaw was tight. "You gave me my son back better than I sent him to you. That's not a job. That's a calling." She didn't have an answer for that, just accepted it with the quiet grace of someone learning slowly how to receive what they've earned. An hour later, the assembly hall had emptied to just Riker and Lena, the ambient quiet of a space where something important had just finished. "You okay?" he asked. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she said. "Like I still matter. Like what I did here meant something beyond just surviving it." She turned the medal over in her hands. "I've spent 2 years being someone who doesn't exist. Operating in the dark. Being valuable precisely because nobody knew I was there." Her voice was thoughtful, working something out as she said it. "This is the first time I've been seen. Actually seen. And it doesn't feel like exposure. It feels like being real," Riker said. She looked at him. "Yeah, being real." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small envelope. "I've been carrying this since the day after Morrison. Found it in my bunk, figured you or one of the suits left it." He held it out, opened it, and then didn't know what to do with it. Thought maybe now was the right time to tell you that. She took it, opened it, read her own handwriting, the note she'd left before any of this in a life that felt like someone else's now. The rook pin caught the light when she tipped the envelope. She held the pin for a long time. "I left this when I thought it was the only honest thing I could give someone," she said. "A piece of what I used to be. A warning almost, about the cost of living in the dark." Her thumb moved over the small metal surface. "I don't think it means the same thing now." "What does it mean now?" She closed her fingers around it. "That you can carry your history without being trapped inside it. That what you've done in the dark doesn't have to define what you choose to do in the light." She looked up at him. "Keep it. But that's the meaning now, not the other one." He took it back, pressed it into his palm. "Rex comes home next week." Her face changed completely, the controlled surface gone, just the real thing underneath. "I know. Dr. Chen cleared me to manage him as long as I'm not doing anything that would compromise my recovery." A small, genuine smile. She said that twice, very slowly, like she thought I might not understand the first time. "Smart woman." "Extremely." The smile held. "I'm going to walk to the door to meet him, whatever it takes. I'm going to be standing when he comes through that door." Riker looked at her. "You will be." "You can't know that." "I know you," he said simply. "That's enough." 3 months later, a message arrived on Riker's phone during a particularly brutal advanced training session, a single line from a contact he'd kept, because some connections you don't let go of, even when geography and classification make them inconvenient. "Rex is home. 22 steps unassisted yesterday. New unit starts Monday. They're already underestimating me. Should be interesting." He read it twice. Showed it to Martinez, who showed it to Brennan, and then it traveled through the whole unit the way good news travels fast with accumulating warmth. He typed back, "We're applying everything you taught us, making you proud or trying to. How's Rex?" Her response took 4 minutes, which meant she was probably in the middle of something, which meant she was already working, which meant everything was exactly as it should be. "Rex is home. He's sitting next to my chair right now, with his head on my knee, which violates 3 separate facility regulations, and I don't care even slightly. Tell your unit to stop trying to make me proud and start actually earning it. Those are different things." Then after a pause, "You already know the difference. That's the whole point." Riker put his phone away and went back to the drill. She was right. She was usually right. He'd stopped being surprised by it and started being grateful for it, which was itself the lesson that the people worth learning from are the ones who remain worth learning from even after you've stopped underestimating them. They broke both her legs to silence her. They sent professionals to erase her. They buried her identity 4 separate times across 6 years, trying to reduce her to something small enough to contain. None of it worked. Because some people are not built to be contained. Some people are built to teach, to endure, to transform every attempt to diminish them into something their students can learn from. Some people carry the darkest possible history and still choose to walk toward the light, even when walking costs them everything, even when the steps are measured in 1s and 2s, even when the dog at their knee is the only witness to how hard each one is. Lena Cross had been a ghost, an asset, a weapon, a target. Now she was something harder to kill than any of those things. She was the person her students became because of her, and that kind of survival doesn't end when the story does. It just keeps going in every room where someone who learned from her chooses to step forward instead of back. That's the truest thing she ever taught them, and she taught it without saying a single word.